These 5 emotional habits once protected you, but now they're just keeping you small. These emotional patterns can be unlearned. And when you do, it just opens up a whole new world, just sense of freedom. You're not so tied down by all these things that keep you stuck, and you can really start living. So it's this sense that you really don't deserve to have what other people have. You were raised to believe you weren't allowed to have what you wanted. Don't shine too brightly because that's going to piss people off. These 5 emotional habits once protected you, but now they're just keeping you small. And today I'm talking about the 5 emotional patterns that you need to unlearn after being raised by a narcissistic mother. And the first of these is people pleasing. And this is a bit of a misnomer because the desire is actually not to please others. It is rooted in a fear of rejection or a fear of disappointing other people, a fear of abandonment, all of that. And of course, this started in childhood with your mother when she trained you to fear a loss of love if you don't go along with what someone else wants. And so anytime you didn't please her, there was a threat of that bond being severed. And as a little one, you were totally dependent on her, and that bond was all important. So you would do anything you needed to do to preserve that bond at the expense of yourself. So pleasing her became paramount because that is how you believed you kept her love. That is how you stopped her from abandoning you, which would have felt life-threatening to a child. But as an adult, you now do this with everybody. You have this fear of rejection and abandonment from everybody that you meet, or this fear of disappointing people, or this fear that you're going to be a bad person if you don't do exactly what everybody wants. And it doesn't matter what relationship you have with these people. It could be someone that you just met on the street. Like I've heard of women who some stranger will be talking to them, and instead of excusing themselves, they'll actually be late for an appointment. So it's almost like it feels worse to leave the conversation, cut the person off, and get to your appointment on time than it does to allow this person to ramble on and be late for your appointment. And this might all be going on below the surface. Like you might not be weighing those pros and cons consciously, but that is the deduction that you've made. So you've really decided that it's safer for me to disappoint and let myself down than it is to do that to someone else, even if they are a stranger. And I want you to think about that because you might be doing that almost on a daily basis, letting yourself down to avoid letting other, even random people down. And that is what is called poor boundaries. It's people pleasing and poor boundaries go hand in hand. And it's one of the biggest reasons you might not be where you want to be in your life. Boundaries are really important in order to get you what you want out of this life. And if you are a big people pleaser, the boundaries are not going to come. And so unlearning your people pleasing, learning that it's more important to disappoint someone else in order to avoid disappointing myself. It's something you want to grasp if you want to have, all that life has for you. And then number 2 ties into this a little bit, and it's self-blame. So the thing that prevents you from standing up for yourself or saying what you need and want instead of people pleasing, it comes from this feeling of like, I'm guilty, I'm a bad person. If someone's not happy with me, it's got to be because I'm wrong. We rarely assume that it's the other person. And of course, this is another conditioning from your mother who had you believe that, yeah, if something's wrong between us, it's because of you and you have to do the work to repair. And in fact, that was her narcissism. She enjoyed watching you grovel. It wasn't possible for her to admit that she was wrong. She had to put the blame on you. She encouraged your guilt so that she could assuage her own. And so now you feel like if there's ever even a delay in being responded to by text or email, perhaps you might start to assume that somebody's mad at you, that you've done something wrong, and and you'll spiral into this, what can I do to make it better? Even though you don't know what really happened, instead of thinking neutrally, like, oh, maybe they're busy, or I guess they have something else on their mind, you go straight to, it's my fault. What have I done? I'm in trouble. And again, this is the conditioning that your mother gave you. And this is why you might have a lot of one-sided relationships where you're doing all the initiating, you're doing all the repair if there is any that needs to be done. You're the one who's always reaching out. And a lot of women I talk to, and this has happened to me as well, when you stop doing the work of constantly initiating, constantly making plans, constantly doing repair if there's any that needs to be done, and you stop doing that, you might notice that this person disappears. So you find out very quickly who your friends are, because if you stop doing all the emotional labor, which relieves them of having to do any of their own, they might just decide this is not for them. And part of us might be avoiding that. And part of us might know, the subconscious part that runs everything knows that if I stop doing the work, they are going to disappear. And that's what we're afraid of. So often it's about getting your self-worth and your confidence up so that you can withstand that rejection or abandonment if it comes. Because if you are in that cycle of doing all the work with someone who, in a one-sided relationship, often it's because you're not ready to face the truth that they might disappear or they might not like it if I actually demand a little bit more from them. And so that brings me to my third emotional pattern of daughters of narcissistic mothers, and that is the low self-worth. So it's this sense that you really don't deserve to have what other people have. This is a common theme with the women I work with, and it has nothing to do with what you can afford. Because a lot of people might think, oh, well, I can't have certain things because I can't afford them. But I'm talking about women who can easily afford the things that they want, but they deprive themselves of it because of this underlying belief that they don't deserve it. And this could be in material things like clothes, or it could be in experiences like travel, or it could be in relationships, settling for relationships with people who aren't up to your standard. They don't give you what you need. They don't excite you, or you don't relate to them, or they take from you and they never give. All of that stuff. Or maybe they're very, very toxic. Maybe it's a narcissistic partner, something even more sinister. And this is again from the upbringing where you were raised to believe you weren't allowed to have what you wanted. You weren't allowed to ask for things. You might have been called selfish or ungrateful if you asked for anything. Everything was always about her. And in order to stay safe, you had to go along with that. So, you would just stop asking if you never got what you wanted, or if you were made to believe that you're going to lose love if you ask for anything, you're just going to stop asking. And then you internalize that belief that you just don't deserve to have what other people have. And I can remember as a young woman having this voice in my head. I don't know if it was audible, but it was this distinct sense that whenever I wanted something, that voice would come up and say, that's not for you. And it was just this feeling like other people can have that, but I can't. And again, it was nothing to do with what I could afford. I just wouldn't allow myself to have these things. And I could never just walk into a store and just buy an outfit, for example, like my friends would. Or I could never just go into a salon and get my nails done like my friends would. Like it just was this feeling that that's not for you. You don't get to have those things. And so I was constantly depriving myself. And I was very, quote unquote, responsible with my money. So on the outside, it probably looked like good financial habits, because I would do things like make double payments on my mortgage. When I was owning a home, I would pay double on my mortgage. Like even when the interest rate was really, really low, like below 2%. I realize now that that was self-deprivation. That was not fiscal responsibility because there was no need for me to do that. My life is very different now. I can tell you that I spend on myself to a level that many would consider luxury, and I don't deprive myself. And I am still financially responsible, so you can have both. And the fourth emotional pattern of daughters is dimming your light or making yourself small. And this is something a lot of us do because we feel like it is offensive to other people or harmful to other people if we show up too big or too bright. When in fact, the truth is that if you show up as all of yourself and you are kind of big and bold and all that you can be, that is going to be inspiring and encouraging to the right people. A lot of people want you to be everything you can be so you can inspire them to do the same. But what we believe instead is that we're going to be punished for that, that people are going to reject us, which is horrifying to us, of course. And we think that we're harming other people if we show up in our fullness. And so instead what we do is we try to fit in with the lowest common denominator, the people that we find ourselves around, which often are people that aren't that great for us. They're people who don't understand us. They're people who maybe we don't really relate to. But because we've been wearing this false mask and pretending to be something we're not, because that's what we were taught to do in childhood to please the mother, they don't really know the real us. We're afraid to show up as our true selves. And so not only are we not connected with ourselves, we're not connected with other people, and we're not attracting in the people who are good for us, the people who would help us become even more of who we are. Instead, we're working so hard to stay small so as not to offend anyone and not to lose anyone's love, that we're missing out on all the greatness that might be inside of us, all the ways we're supposed to contribute to the world that we haven't tapped into because we're too afraid of shining our light. And then on top of that, there's the conditioning that our mother gave us that it's okay to shine to a certain extent, but don't outshine me. So we were walking that tightrope of needing to be the good girl, even kind of the perfect girl, the pretty girl, the smart girl, whatever it was, the athletic girl, the social girl, whatever it was for you. But if we do anything too well, we're going to take the spotlight away from mother, and then we're going to get in trouble. We're going to lose her love. She's not going to like that. So we got to walk this very thin line of being good enough that she can use us to look good to other people, because that's what she does. And my mother used to say, let me show you off. If we were at a social gathering or anything, she'd take me, move me around like a trophy and say, let me show you off. And now sometimes that expression, it's not always bad to say that. I'm sure sometimes people say it in a way that's just endearing and it's because they're proud of you. So I'm not saying that expression is wrong in itself, but you can feel the difference. And it felt off to me. It felt very objectifying. And I did feel like her trophy that she was just carrying around. And it was nothing to do with me. It was all about her. It was like my light was shining on her to make her look good. I was almost like just a flashlight that was being shone on the person who really mattered, which was her. And that's what she was using me for. So I knew my place there. I'm there to shine light on her, but if I kind of shine light on myself, that's not going to work out. That's not going to be good to her. And again, this all can be very subconscious. And so you learn to shine to a certain extent. You've got to be good, even perfect, but don't shine too brightly because that's going to piss people off. You don't want to do that. And of course, that is not true. We want to be all that we can be, not only to inspire and encourage the right people, but we want to attract people who appreciate us for who we really are. And we want to repel people because there are going to be people who want to keep us small. And that can be very scary to a daughter because you have lived your whole life trying so hard to make everybody happy because you have believed that your very life depends on this, and to discover when you heal that actually we want to be repelling the wrong people can be a real adjustment, and it's a real source of freedom when you do get there. And the final emotional pattern, number 5, is that of having a thin skin. And what I mean by that is that you can't take criticism. So any kind of criticism or even feedback that isn't positive makes you crumble. You know, if you've ever had the situation, perhaps at work, where you received some feedback that wasn't 100% positive, and you would be inconsolable. You would start to cry either there or go to the bathroom, and you would be like a child, you know, heaving and sobbing and feeling like it's the end of the world because someone told you your work wasn't perfect. That's just an example. And I've been there. I've had workplace experiences like that. And it feels like in that situation, there's some transference going on, perhaps, where that boss or that coworker is your mother, and you are the child who can never do anything right. No matter how hard you try, it's never good enough. And that's how you feel in that situation. So instead of, as a normal adult employee would do, instead of taking the feedback and perhaps learning from it, or not all feedback is good. Maybe this criticism is not constructive, and you can parse it out and say, hey, that person's off base. I actually did the right thing there. Maybe they're not my friend. Maybe they're trying to sabotage me. Lots of things go on in the workplace. It can be quite dysfunctional in itself. But instead, you take it on as if you were the child and that person is your mother. You feel all those old feelings. And this is what it is to be triggered, in fact. You feel like you're right back there. You're trapped in that old place. You have no power. You're back in the home with your mother. You feel as though, because you are so externally focused and because you believe your value comes from what you do instead of who you are, that if your work is criticized or you are criticized in any way, you feel all of a sudden almost like you're being killed. And I know that sounds harsh, but it's like an annihilation of your very being, because you have built yourself on what other people think of you. You've built yourself according to these external sources of validation. So if one of them tells you you're not perfect, that is devastating. That is devastating to the level of life-threatening, and you really feel it that way. So that's why if you have encountered criticism and you can't take it, that's the reason why. When in fact, criticism or feedback is just information. All it is, it could be information. If it's good criticism, it could be information that you can use to do better next time. If it's unwarranted criticism, like a troll online or maybe someone at work who doesn't have your back, or even a frenemy, this is information about that person. You know, it's information that maybe I shouldn't trust this person. Maybe I want to be careful around this person and take the steps I need to protect myself. But instead, in these situations, we lose all logic and we just become a puddle, a little child who is in its survival mode and doesn't know what to do. It just feels like it's the end of the world and there is no way out. That is really how it feels when you get criticized. So those are some of the emotional patterns. It's not an exhaustive list, but I would say some universal ones that almost all daughters of narcissistic mothers experience. And these emotional patterns, as I mentioned, can be unlearned. I have unlearned them. And when you do, it just opens up a whole new world of just sense of freedom. You're not so tied down by all these things that keep you stuck, and you can really start living. So thank you for listening. I am grateful to bring this information to you. If you've enjoyed this video, I encourage you to subscribe, and I'll bring you videos every week. Stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.